Most people like to think that freedom is a product of having more time and financial resources. But I personally believe that the ultimate freedom is self acceptance. And this also happens to be one of the most magnetic things that you can embody in your business. Because at the end of the day, self acceptance is what we all truly crave. In a world where AI generated content and there's millions and millions of competitors, the likelihood, if you're listening to this, is that you're not inventing something new. Maybe you're offering a service, maybe you're a mentor or a coach, and while you may have a unique process, it's not a new innovation in any sense. So how do you stand out? How do you cut through the noise? Well, self-acceptance, unapologetic, claiming of who we are is the way to achieve this. Now, for over 10 years of my life, in my 20s, I hid the fact that I once used to be an erotic dancer. I was ashamed and I thought people would judge me. I thought that I would get canceled for it. And even my best friends didn't know. The only person who really knew was my now ex-husband. But what ended up happening is that it was weighing down on me. It felt like I had to wear a mask. It felt like I was putting on a facade and I wasn't owning who I was. And in not accepting this part of myself, I was ultimately teaching everyone around me, though I wasn't consciously doing it, shame. That's what was happening. It took me a lot of courage to confess to this. And when I did, that's when I realized that fear is really a voice of delusion, because rather than getting canceled or ostracized or shamed for it, I think it drew people to me even more. It made me more relatable and more colorful. Now, just because I went through this and I understand how releasing our shames is a powerful part of self-acceptance doesn't mean that I am free of shames at any one given time. You see, as we grow and as we expand, we're constantly faced with this inner critic. And so most recently in my life, I also encountered some shame. And this one was related to a little bad habit that I picked up. So I have a fairly healthy lifestyle. I don't drink. I work out 4 to 5 times a week. I eat pretty clean and green. But a year and a half ago, I would say, I was at a party and somebody handed me a vape and I got hooked. And I used to smoke cigarettes when I was, 18, 20 years old, but I got rid of that habit. And then the moment I picked up that vape, it was just like I got hooked right back into it. And I really shamed myself for this because I was telling myself, well, I'm supposed to have free will and power over my will, and yet there's this thing I can't seem to let go of or release, and I'm such a degenerate, I'm such a loser. These were the thoughts going through my head, and I was so ashamed of it that I even hid it from my partner, and I would vape in the closet or in the bathroom and, hide it from my children as well. And I went through a workshop recently where we were looking at our shames and how to release them to step into unapologetic self-acceptance. And I decided to come clean, foster the courage once more, come clean and tell my partner. Turns out he already knew. I thought I was being, coy or whatever about it. He already knew. And when I went through this workshop, I invited participants to confess a shame that they're holding on to in a private container that we were in. Because while I'm not religious, I really appreciate the practice of Christianity and Catholicism where there's confessionals and you go there to talk about your shames, talk about the things that burden you, because there is a big release in saying it, in releasing it. That's exactly what it does. It releases that shame when you tell other people. Now, ideally, it's going to be, if the shame that you're holding on to, let's say you created an act that was out of integrity towards somebody, ideally releasing that shame will be towards that person. However, that takes a lot of courage. And so even just telling a stranger or a friend or somebody will put you on the pathway towards being able to fully talk about it and confess it. And so while we were doing this workshop and I talked about this shame and I confessed to it, I realized, well, I was hiding this from my children. And I know, even though I'm not explicitly teaching them shame or consciously trying to do that, the mere act of hiding something from them is teaching them that behavior. So I sat my children down and I said, this is the situation. I would love your support and help. It's not something that I want to keep doing. And it really deepened our relationship. It was actually quite incredible. And you can tell that long term, this is going to foster a lot more trust between me and my children, because instead of hiding things, we have an open communication line. Now, after that workshop and after confessing this, I haven't purchased another vape since then. That has been the power of releasing that shame. But confessing to these things, talking openly about these parts of ourselves, owning our past experiences, warts and all, is one of the most relatable things that you can do, because it's a part of your story, and every story has duality. A story that is just perfection and emotional greens or greens is frankly unrelatable and quite fucking boring. Truly. When's the last time you watched a movie or read a book when the protagonist woke up and they were happy and they were happy some more and then they were happy again and the end? Right? The things that make us relate to the protagonist are the challenges and the problems that they face and how they counter that. And it is also the humanity piece of themselves, which means there's a duality. And when we are holding shame, what we're telling ourselves is that we are not fully accepting parts of ourselves. And when we do that, that's when we begin to fear the judgment of others, because we fear our own inner critic. And so if you're finding yourself in a situation where you're not posting content, or you're not putting offers out, or you're not putting yourself out there, sharing your message because you're afraid of judgment from other people, I would say, where are you holding that judgment towards yourself? And one of the biggest portals that you can do or look at to help you create that release, to step into that unapologetic acceptance, is to look at the shames that you're holding around yourself. Now, I'm not political. I shouldn't be even allowed to vote, to be honest, because I don't watch the news. I have no fucking clue about politics. It just doesn't interest me. But one of the things that's been very interesting from the Donald Trump and the election is how this man is marred in chaos and duality. And yet he's unapologetic about it. From what I've seen about him, he owns it. He's unapologetic about it. And he won the election over somebody who was trying to put a facade of perfection up. And so you see those parts of ourselves that we think are broken, those parts of ourselves that we think we need to hide, those parts of ourselves that we are ashamed of, are actually what make you so relatable and so magnetic to others. And in a world with millions and millions of competitors, people doing much of the same of what you're doing, sometimes doing it at a fraction of the cost, What makes you stand out isn't the features. It isn't your unique 3-step process. It's your story. And your story becomes relatable when you own it fully. And so if you're wanting to step into the vibration of courage, which is the vibration of play, by the way, and you want to take the first step towards this unapologetic acceptance, I invite you to confess. Confess to a stranger, confess to a friend, and if you have big balls, confess to the people that it involves, the people you're most afraid of finding out. And do so not from a space of poor me, but from a space of owning it. This is what's happened to me. And if you need support to go through it, ask for that. I'm sharing this because I need help. And you will find on the back of this spurred energy, almost like a belt unbuckled, like you can breathe, like you can be free, like you can be you. Building a business and trying to put a facade or a mask or present a perfect image of yourself will drain the life out of you long term. It will leave no room or margin for errors or mistakes, and that's when you get canceled. But the moment you start to operate and create and own your shit from the get-go, suddenly there's a high tolerance for mistakes. People will stick it through. They know you. And your business will feel light. You will be able to be who you are authentically inside of your business. This is going to lead to more creativity, more clarity, more energy, more of the emotional greens. So, it takes a lot of courage, not gonna lie. I mean, as you're listening to this and you're like, okay, Kat, vaping, whatever. Maybe some of you guys are judging it and you're like, oh, that's bad. And maybe some of you guys are like, well, that's not a big deal. It was a really scary thing for me to confess to because my inner voice around it was really harsh and negative. And in that confession, which was just to a group that I was mentoring, I found so much freedom, and I was able to own that habit. And in owning it, I've been able to control my behaviors around it. And because of that, I believe that I have created even more connection with the people that I work with. Because they see that I'm a human. They see that I'm not perfect. They see that I have these things that I'm working through. And nobody wants perfection. It's not what we need. The world doesn't need more perfection, my friends. You go on social media and it makes you feel bad about your life sometimes. Presents a facade that will eventually blow up if you're not owning unapologetically who you are. Now, there's a lot of different layers to this, to showing up authentically, owning who you are, but this shame piece is one of the biggest portals to this. Because as long as you hold that over yourself and you are in denial or in rejection of either your past or things that you've done or things that you're currently doing, whether it be experiences or behaviors or thoughts or perspectives, you are going to be in deep fear of the judgment and criticism of others, and this will stop you from going into action, from creating big value exchanges, from putting yourself out there. You will become paralyzed by your own inner critic. There's nothing to be ashamed of. Nothing. You're human. You have a dual experience. It's okay if you made mistakes. It's okay if you hit some reds. It's okay if you're struggling with something right now. But so long as you shame yourself for it, it's going to be a circuit that's going to be very difficult for you to get out of. This is like weight loss, right? As long as somebody is shaming themselves for their weight, or their weight gain, it's going to be almost impossible for them to shed that weight. As long as you're shaming your child for a behavior, you will see that behavior exacerbated. And then you're probably going to have a very rebellious child later on, or a strained relationship with them. It doesn't work with our kids. It doesn't work with our spouses or our partners when we shame them. It doesn't work with our employees, and it certainly doesn't fucking work on ourselves. And if you're really out of courage and you cannot confess this to anybody, join a group or something, post it anonymously, which you can do. And if even that's a stretch for you to do, find the vibration of courage, find the vibration of play, go into activities that push you outside of your comfort zone, and you will be able to touch that vibration, and you will be able to get yourself to a place where you can confess it and let it go and accept that part of yourself. And this isn't just a once and done and that's it, you're set for life. Like I said, we're growing, we're constantly evolving, and at each marker in our life, we tend to pick these up. So I've done it in my late 20s. I've done it around many other things, and I will continue to do this in the future because I'm sure there's going to be other things in my life that I shame myself for. But I am able to express myself, to show up and not give a fuck what other people think about me, because I am accepting of myself, and I'm teaching myself intentionally how to accept myself. And this is what drives a lot of people to me. It's not necessarily that I am inventing a rocket to space, or that I have the best sales pages or the best pricing out there. It's that I'm relatable. It's the most magnetic thing you can do for your business. And if you have a lot of courage, talk about it in your content. Tell your audience. It's what's going to make you different from everybody out there. Your story, who you are, your experiences, your past, what you're going through. So thank you for tuning into another episode of the Flow Protocols. If you'd like to learn more about these red light, green light concepts that I keep dropping, make sure you grab a copy of Magic Source Codes. That one is the foundational work to building emotional competence, how our thoughts and perspectives affect our behaviors and in turn affect our emotions and in turn affect our behaviors and actions, and therefore the very circumstances we find ourselves in. Otherwise, I will see you guys on the next episode. Thanks for tuning in.